From the one, Mahomes, end zone. He's got another.
There's really only two guys on the team that have any sort of consistency, and other than that, it's kind of it's a crapshoot.
Into the wind, way down the field. Oh my goodness! This is going to be 98 yards.
Gabe Davis was tremendous for us. We had the confidence to go in and play him, and he rewarded that faith.
We're not playing as a team. Each week, some players show up and others don't.
We feel good about this team. We've got one more game in our division before we get to rivalry week, and we're ready to continue to stack W's, continue to make a push for that number one seed, and make a run to the playoffs. Hello and welcome to the Hammer and the Nail, the engineering class recap show. Yosef Nasser here, as always, with Nick Rogowski. I obviously got the win against Brian, moving to 4-1. But after the events of Monday night, Nick, nobody really cares about my matchup. In the week, 4 games decided by 4 points or fewer, and sadly, Nick, you were one of those teams, one of those matchups, facing Sevy, down big heading into the Monday night game. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce bring you right to the brink.
I love this dude right here, baby. This is my dog. This is my dog. This is my dog. This is my dog. This is my dog.
We keep fighting, baby.
Is this rock bottom for you? How are you feeling, Rogo? This is as tough as it gets in terms of how to lose a game that you could have won.
Yeah, I think everybody in the league is kind of tired of listening to my sob story week in and week out. But I think this was after what happened this week, going into Monday night with my 2 best players, but down 79 points. Looking for the greatest comeback in fantasy football history, for it to even come down to what it came down to, and to have somebody dangle that win in front of my face like it's a $100 bill, and I just have to reach out and grab it. It stings. And I just want it to be known that if I was a Raiders fan, I would have the Raiders head coach, whatever his name is, I would have him.
Josh McDaniels.
If I was a Raiders fan, I would have Josh McDaniels bound by leather strings, put an apple in his mouth, and push him off the miniature Eiffel Tower building in downtown Vegas for what he did.
Let's take another look. It is automatically reviewed upstairs. The knees are up. Now the knee is down.
Why would you go for 2 points with 4 minutes and 22 seconds left? You kick the field goal.
How do you move forward? I mean, we were talking off camera. You have the 3rd most points scored in the league, and you've just had, for whatever reason, atrocious luck. I put it in the group chat yesterday, the fact that in the past 3 seasons, you've had top 2 points against. You can't even write the script. It's outrageous when you look at the numbers. How do you move forward when the odds are stacked against you? And even in these games where you're scoring a lot of points, you're not getting away with dubs.
There are no asterisks in this life, only scoreboards. And ours is currently reading fucked.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. And, fantasy football is, 95% mental and 5% luck. So obviously I don't have too much either, but we just got to keep moving and moving forward. We're moving into where the buys are going to start happening. So really, for the next 5 weeks, really anything can happen. As long as you have a little bit of strategy in how you're going to, plug and play some guys in there, which I think I have. I've kind of prepared myself for it. And, we just kind of have to, at this point, hit and hope. Maybe get into voodoo or something. I don't know. Might have to start wearing jeans as shirts and shirts as pants. I don't know what's going on. So I don't really know what to tell you. I'm just here to hit and hope.
Rogo, it's moments like these where I think to the wise words of former U.S. President John F. Kennedy.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your
fantasy team
can do for you. Ask what you can do for your
fantasy team.
Okay, well, let's get to some of the storylines from around the league. We talked about 4 games decided by 4 points or fewer, and one of those consequential Monday night games was a game that we said was the game of the week. Blocker and Drew fighting for first place in the engineering class 16 South Division. And, we were expecting fireworks. We got the fireworks out of your game against Sevi. This game was a little bit of a snoozer in terms of scoring points, but Blocker was able to get the win courtesy of Devontae Adams having the massive game. He outscored Derek Carr by 6 points. That's exactly what Blocker needed to win. You're in the South. Do you see Blocker as the best team in the division, or is it still Drew, despite the fact that he took the L here?
I mean, I think if you look at these two teams side by side, they're almost identical. I mean, the tight end position, you really don't know what you're going to get. I think it's a huge weak point for Blocks' team and Drew. You got Hawkinson. You don't know what you're going to get from him week in and week out. But no, I mean, you really look at these teams. Derek Carr kind of came into his own a little bit, had a decent game this week. Not enough to help propel Drew into a victory, but no, I mean, side by side, these teams are pretty much pretty even, I think. So we kind of saw it with the score here. Or was it 4 points decided it? So
yep.
Yeah, I think these teams are pretty even. I think I would give the edge to Blocks right now, just because you don't know what you're going to get out of Derek Carr, and Justin Herbert's been pretty consistent this year, even with that injury. So I'll give Blocks just the slight edge, just because he's undefeated.
This game was not on Monday night, or it wasn't decided on Monday night, but Kyle coming 1 point short of MB. Kyle had a great Christian McCaffrey game, a great Alvin Kamara game, and he couldn't quite get it done. In a similar situation to you, where you're really starting to see separation in the South. And this is more for comedy's sake in terms of Quinn's loss to Raymond. MB brought this up. Had Quinn started Kyler Murray, had he started Aaron Rodgers, he might be in the thick of things there in the South. Instead, he falls to 1-4. For me, the real storyline, Sevi, in my opinion, grabbing pole position in the South with that win. And I think what we've seen in the past few weeks, initially I thought that the North was stronger than the South, but now the South really making a push. When you look at 4 of the top 6 teams in the league are in that South division.
Yeah, and I think since we just discussed Drew and Blocks, I think you got to put Sevi's name right in that discussion as one of the best teams, not only in the South, but in the whole league. I mean, you mentioned it, and he's second in points for in the league, and his points against are, right up there as well. So it's not like he's had pushover games. He's got a really solid team, and he's definitely in the mix right there with Drew and Blocks.
What we're going to do next, no guest today because Nick has me up at the crack of dawn. He's got meetings all day, so it's the power rankings, kind of a rapid fire power rankings, an opportunity to get some takes off about some of these teams. We'll be right back after this message.
I'm Yosef Nasser, and I love my mom. That's why when it was time for her to sell her home, there was only one choice.
I'm the best owner in the league, so I should be in the championship every single year.
Oh my goodness. Kyle Toomey has been a loser in the Engineering Class Fantasy Football League this year, but he's a proven winner in the game of real estate. He's been named the Washingtonians' top real estate agent, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 26 times. And he helps his clients maximize the value they get for their home. So if you're looking to sell your property, the choice is clear. This fantasy team may be vile, still, sell with Kyle.
Without further ado, Rogo, you've had a chance to look at the names, look at the teams. Who do you think is the worst team in the league right now?
I think pretty much hands down, I think we've got to go Tony. He's the little man on the totem pole. I mean, the low man on the totem pole. There's really just nothing impressive about his team. I think he's got the lowest average of points per game. Yeah, I got to put Tony there.
He had a devastating loss last week. Teddy Bridgewater got hurt early in that game against the Jets and gave him the big goose egg. But even still, the point that I would make is that when your season's coming down to needing Teddy Bridgewater to put up 22 points, that kind of says it all. We know what Teddy Bridgewater is. You mentioned a few weeks ago that quarterback's really important this year. Tony went in with Matt Stafford and really no contingency plan. Matt Stafford, shit hit the fan with him. It's just been a bad year. It wasn't a great draft. Najee Harris averaging 9 points a game through 5 weeks. Javonte Williams, you lose him. Bottom barrel quarterback play. He's just really behind the 8 ball in terms of points, in terms of tiebreakers. Think about this, Rogo. The only relevant tiebreaker he has is Brian, and Brian's on the outside looking in of that playoff race. Every other team that you're looking at, whether you're talking about Frank, whether you're talking about myself, whether you're talking about Jacob Bennett, who he just lost to this past week. He's got Raymond next week. That's an important, if he is to get back in it, he needs that Raymond game because that could be an important tiebreaker in the 4th seed there. But I think this is the right call. He's losing every points battle when it comes to ties because he's averaging 86 a game. It's just not a good year. So I think that Tony is the right pick there. For me, at 13, the team I'm going to go to, there are a few options here. I know this guy had a big game last week, or not a big game. That's not the way to put it. He's got 2 players who had a big game. It's Quinn. And I think his team's not going to be as much of a joke as we thought it was because of the fact that Josh Jacobs and Leonard Fournette have shown themselves to be guys who can put up RB1 weeks. Everything else is an absolute disaster. And, Quinn's kind of a jokester. He's kind of a troll or whatever. He took 3 quarterbacks for some reason. And he's not playing the right guy. So what's the point of picking all of these quarterbacks if you're not going to trade them and you're going to pick the wrong guy every week? You're setting yourself back. And this was after he returned from the pub in Ireland, wherever he was, riding the bicycle with Lance Armstrong across the Mediterranean Sea. Like this is this is, he had returned. He had gotten back in the draft room and he was still stubbornly taking quarterbacks. It's just with the context of how good the South has turned out to be and the fact that he lost that game by 1 point and the fact that he's making questionable decisions. I mean, Hunter Henry is his starting tight end. He's averaging 3 points a game. Robbie Anderson's his starting wide receiver too. He's averaging 7 points a game. The combination of how bad the team's been thus far and how bad Quinn has been as a fantasy manager, not necessarily in his career, but this year, I've got him at 13. Who are you going with at 12?
At 12, I'm going with Kyle Toomey. He's right there with Tony in terms of points for. And the crazy thing is he's 1-4, but if he had 2 more points last week or this week and had won that game against the home, he's at 2-3 and he's right back in it. You mentioned McCaffrey and Kamara kind of came out of it this week, and they've been letting him down. Obviously, other than that, he doesn't really have too much on his team. Tom Brady's old; he's burnt out. He's done. There's just really nothing on this team that gives me any real hope for him coming out of this thing. And it's crazy that I say that because his team's so bad, and yet he was 2 points away from being, back in the conversation.
The good news for Kyle is that he plays Quinn next week. So if you can't win that game, I don't know what to tell you, buddy.
He might have to retire from the league.
You went with Kyle at 12. I'm going to go at 11. I'm going to go with Brian. And Brian has had some bad luck with the injuries, but there's not a lot here on this roster to kind of withstand those injuries. Amon-Ra St. Brown played on a bad ankle. He didn't really get anything going. Missing Michael Thomas. Cam Akers was a bust in the second round. You really can't play him. Nice pickup with Raheem Mostert there, 18 points. But you're talking about league worst quarterback play with Ryan Tannehill. Brian's team looked like it had a chance to be really, really good at the beginning of the season. But as long as those receivers are down, it's just not the case. And we talked about it with Tony in the North Division. It seems like we're really seeing teams start to separate. When you talk about Frank, myself, Bennett, and Raymond with healthy points leads as well, I think that the 4 teams that we've mentioned so far, those are the bottom 4 teams in points. I think Brian is the right pick there, and I'm guessing you're probably going to go with another person in the North at number 10 in the power rankings.
Yeah, you definitely guessed right. It's going to be Driscoll. Kind of another. His team's very similar to what Brian's team is. I think. I think some of us thought that Driscoll might have a decent team after he drafted, but very underwhelming quarterback play from Joe Burrow. Kind of like the same. He's kind of the same story as Matthew Stafford. The Rams and Bengals, we really don't know what they are. Joe Burrow, I think he's top 10 quarterback. I think he's number 9, so he hasn't been that bad. He just hasn't been, I think, what we all thought Joe Burrow was going to be. James Conner, underwhelming. He does have Cooper Kupp and DK Metcalf, who have been pretty solid. But after that, it's just kind of a toss-up.
I think Driscoll's team is more of a mediocre team than an actual bad team, and that's because of Cooper Kupp. I mean, Cooper Kupp, if we do the draft right now, he's the number 1 pick in fantasy. He's averaging just under 26 points a game in a terrible dysfunctional Rams offense. He's been a consistent force. I mean, games of 31, 31, 16, 26, 25. I mean, that's setting the table for you each and every week. And he is a guy who has had some Nick Rogowski bad luck, Chuck luck. He's Driscoll is 4th in points against, so he's been behind the 8 ball there a little bit, but the pieces aren't quite there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire came crashing back to earth. James Conner, as you mentioned, just really hasn't been consistent. It's a 2, maybe 3-man team here, and that's just not enough to get it done. Moving upwards in the standings, looking at some of the other teams here, I think you got to go with bad luck Chuck himself in the power rankings. At number 9, I'm going with you, Rogo. And look, we understand how lethal that combination of Mahomes to Kelsey is, and it's just a question, what can you feel around that? I mean, you mentioned Joe Burrow not performing up to his standard. Joe Mixon was your first-round pick, and he's the RB15 through 5 weeks. He hasn't had the explosive games that you expect of a player of that caliber. His best game of the season, 21 points in week 1. After that, 10, 6, 17, 11. He's a guy who he's getting the volume, but you really need to start seeing those touchdowns, those 5, 6, 7 reception games. It hasn't been there. And then the supporting cast, it just doesn't feel like you can rely on what you're getting from Brandon Cooks and Adam Thielen. I mean, you look at those guys going against other teams, wide receivers, 1s and 2s, it feels like you're losing that matchup almost every week. And this past week, those guys had 6 apiece. The RB2 spot's a question mark. You never know who to play between Tony Pollard and Michael Carter. Both of those guys did good last week. And then at the flex, I guess you're going with both of those guys this week. Josh Reynolds has been a find for you, but Josh Palmer has been incredibly disappointing.
I think earlier when we had no home on episode 2, I kind of mentioned that his roster was kind of a 2-man band, and honestly, he could probably throw that saying right back in my face, because my team's looking like Simon and Garfunkel over here with the 2-man band that I'm running. So I think he hit the nail on the head there. It is the best 1-4 team to ever live in engineering class fantasy football. It's a very dubious honor, but I'm clutching at any positive straws that I can at this point.
So Nick, I just took you at 9. You're up at 8. Who are you going to pick for the 8th best team in the league?
I'm going with our good friend MB. I think he's been able to grind out some wins, some sweaty games, which is massive in fantasy football. Whenever you get a chance to get a dub by 1 point, he's also, I think he's won 1 game by 3. That was the Quinn game. He won this past week by 1 against Kyle, and he's also lost a game to me opening week by 1 point. Or was it 1 point? 3 points maybe. Oh no. actually beat the shit out of him. But yeah, he's had some close games, and he's been able to win. There's nothing on this team really outside of Saquon Barkley and just Justin Jefferson. I still think it's kind of a two-man band, but I think in the rankings of two-man band rosters on this in our league here, he's definitely got the best one over mine.
I think that the team can go to another level when Dak Prescott comes back, and until then, he's holding down the fort. But I think this is the right spot for him, this within a range of picks. I had the guy that I'm going to pick next at 7. I had him in this spot, and I'm going to go with Sterlingless Silver Raymond. He's got Lamar Jackson. James Robinson's really fallen off of a cliff. Strange situation with Darren Waller. A few guys this happened to where it's like it looked like they were going to play. T. Higgins. Darren Waller, they were active to play, and then they just kind of no-showed. They were on the sidelines at street closed by halftime. It's an unbalanced roster, right? Keenan's missed a lot of time due to the injury. Dalvin Cook, one of those running backs like we talked about with Joe Mixon, you take him in the first round, but he's not necessarily performing at that elite level. It's just it's a strange hodgepodge of players, but Lamar Jackson is the tide that makes all ships rise, or whatever the saying is, the tide that lifts all ships. 29 points a game at the quarterback position. That's going to give you a high floor every single week. So Raymond at 7. Who do you have at 6, Rogo?
I got Big Bad Bennett. My favorite term for Bennett's team is a little Jekyll and Hyde. And, I think his team is right there. Is his team going to be a force to be reckoned with down the line? I think that's debatable, but I think if he's more Dr. Hyde instead of Jekyll, he might be able to make a little decent push in the playoffs.
He's been dealing with injuries, but he was able to get that win over Tony last week, which is important for tiebreaker purposes. DeAndre Swift's missed the past few weeks with an injury. Kyle Pitts missed last week with an injury. Rashad Penny out for the season with the broken fibula. I think for his sake, you hope that he can kind of right the ship. The pieces are here, and it starts with Jalen Hurts, of course, one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy. At number 5, I'm gonna take a player. It's gonna hit a little close to home, Rogo. I'm picking me. My team's been pretty consistent, but it's been more of a floor play. It's been more of a floor team than a ceiling team. So far, I've been able to get it done, but I do have to acknowledge that my schedule has been fairly easy. Second fewest points against, just behind Drew. I just really feel like I haven't gotten all of these guys on the same page at the same time, and we'll see if we can make that happen moving forward. We've got 4 teams left, Rogo. Who do you have at 4?
I've got Sebi, and I think Sebi could honestly be maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe 4. Like we discussed earlier in the show, it's kind of him, Drew, and blocks. Obviously, he was able to put up 140 this past week and beat me by 2. It's not like I put up less than 100. It wasn't an easy win for him. Obviously, he was sweating his ass off last night, and I think at one point he even thought he was going to lose.
Well, Rogo, he's been getting terrible quarterback play, but the thing that I've been very critical of Sevi's team in the first month of the season, and the thing that's really happened is that those 3 receivers are just dynamic. Stephon Diggs, 23 points a game. Mike Williams, a top 10 receiver this year. CeeDee Lamb, he's getting massive target volume. He's the wide receiver 17 on the year. And then Breece Hall, his emergence as a real RB1. He had 27 points this past week, and he was tackled at the 1-yard line twice. He could have had a 40-point game, a 38-point game this past week. He's the RB9 in fantasy thus far. This is the right range for Sevi with how explosive his team has been. For me, at number 3, we're getting to the big 3. I'm gonna go with blocker here. And the reason is that I just think that Drew's team is deeper, more explosive, and then we're going to talk about Frank as well. I should say that I'm very impressed by Blocker's team. He's done it again. Dominant receivers, late round running back. It looks like he's threaded the needle. Zeke has been a bust the RB35 through 5 weeks. But when you've got Ramondre Stevenson playing the way that he has, Dameon Pierce has been a real steal in the draft. He's got DeAndre Hopkins coming back at some point. He's done it again, but I just think the other two teams, Frank and Drew, the upside is a little bit higher, which is why I put them just above Blocker. But after losing the championship last year to Tony, Blocker has come back and he's done it again. Really impressive squad that he's got there. Two teams left to get to. Rogo, break the tie. Drew and Frank. Who do you have it to?
Yeah, Drew's the doctor. We call him the doctor for a reason. That Grey's Anatomy motherfucker. But yeah, I mean, his team is just like he mentioned in his interview. It's maybe not a team that's going to put up north of 140 points, but it's not really a team that's going to put up less than 110. And I think if you're kind of in that range each week, you're definitely going to be you're going to be in the mix more times than not. He's had some pretty good luck with points against, so that's definitely helped him. But no, we'll see how he can kind of get through the buys. I think if he can kind of maneuver his way through these bye weeks, he's got me coming up, so his team's probably going to put up 150 points. So you know what we say about Drew. He's maybe a top 2, top 3 fantasy owner of all time. So he definitely knows what he's doing, and this roster's kind of a microcosm of how he knows how he can navigate his way through the league.
I actually had Drew at 1. In this exercise, he goes 2, and the Franksters at 1. Like we've said it ad nauseum. When you have a guy like Josh Allen averaging 34 points a game, Rogo, 34 points a game. Nick Chubb, arguably the best back in fantasy on the short list, and he's got enough supporting pieces around it, just consistent. Debo, Amari Cooper, Frank has got a rock solid team, and he's done a great job this season. Hats off to Frank.
Yeah, and I think his team could almost be even better with Debo Samuel. He's had a pretty decent year, but I think Debo Samuel's got a ton of potential moving forward to kind of come into his own and pick it up a little bit more. Obviously, Amari Cooper's been a nice little bright spot in Cleveland, especially with Jacoby Brissett. We didn't know if he was even going to do anything for Cleveland, and he's actually ended up doing a decent job there behind center in Cleveland, and obviously Amari Cooper is one of his favorite targets. So, that's a nice little pickup. And then you got big bad Evan McPherson. He's a top 5 kicker in the league, and I think that's a very underrated position. Ever since he put up 188 on me in week 2 there, it's really ignited his team, and I want to take a lot of that credit. And Frank's my daddy, so I had to put him number 1.
So you're taking the credit for Frank's season. Should we just put you at the top of the power rankings?
I mean,
Fuck Frank.
I think I should definitely be top 5, but no, I'm not taking all the credit, but I'm going to take a lot of the credit for Frank's season. I'm the son of him, and I don't know where I'm going with this.
Just to tie a bow on Frank's team, most points scored in a season in engineering class history. 137.7 in the engineering class 9.0 year. Frank is over 140 through 5 games. So he's having a historic start to the year. We'll see if that production can hold, but either way, clearly one of the best teams in the league this year. All right, it's time. Week 6 matchups. A lot of big matchups at play here. And Rogo, we're going to start with your matchup. You versus Dr. Drew. Now, Drew is dealing with some buys here. No Derek Carr, no TJ Hawkinson, no Derrick Henry. Does that mean that you're going to be able to get a much-needed win? You still have Travis going. You still have Patrick going. They're playing the Bills. Who do you have in this matchup, Rogo?
I'm going to go with Drew. I think it doesn't make any sense for me to pick my team to win when I never win. So, even though I may be a heavy favorite here, and Drew's got a lot of guys on buys, I think he could probably pick up Tyler Javanillo off of the waiver wire, and he would suit up and probably score 25 points. So I'm going with the doctor here, betting against myself. I'm going with Drew.
I am not falling for the reverse jinx at all. Drew's got too many guys down for buys. He's got some good. He's going to be able to fill out a good roster, but when you talk about Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce in that Buffalo game, that's going to be a shootout. That's another 70 points right there, 70 plus points. You're going to have to find someone to fill in for Brandon Cooks, but I have faith that you can do that, Rogo. I am going with you. Next matchup, we talked about your matchup. How about me against Big Bad Bennett? We'll see if Jonathan Taylor, if this is the week that he comes back. I'm feeling good after last week. I'm ready to move to 5-1 in this division, and I'm going with me.
You know, if Jonathan Taylor can come back and Melvin Gordon can continue to kind of get touches there, one-handed Gabe Davis, like you said, the Bills-Kansas City game is going to be a shootout. Yeah, I'm going FC Big Yost here.
Next matchup, Brian versus Frank. Brian trying to stay alive in the North. Frank is not the team that you want to see on the other end. Frank has nobody out due to buys. Brian is out. Ryan Tannehill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Hunter Renfrow. I don't know if he's going to be able to fill a lineup. Michael Thomas may be coming back this week. Is it enough to get the win over Frank?
No, it is not. His only chance is if Michael Thomas comes back and maybe he can put Cam Akers into a flex spot, and maybe Cam Akers can be last year's Cam Akers, but I think that's wishful thinking. I'm going with the best team in the league and Frank.
Yeah, Brian, I'm sorry. It looked after week one. You had a dynamic receiving core. Austin Eckler is tremendous. It just feels like between the injuries, the bad quarterback play, Tannehill's on a bye. Maybe that's a blessing in disguise. Who knows? But the waiver wire is thin. You're going to have to be pretty aggressive to get a guy who can get you even 15 points. Frank's got a guy who can get you 35 to 40, and he's playing Kansas City. I've got to go with Frank here. Our game of the week, Sevy versus MB, a consequential matchup in the South Division as two teams fighting for pole position, trying to solidify a playoff spot.
I think this is going to be a fantastic matchup. I'm going to have to be honest. I know I put a lot of good things into Sevy's pocket during the power rankings in this episode. I think I've got to go MB just because I think Saquon Barkley is going to, have a big game against Baltimore. Justin Jefferson is going to continue to be absolute stud there against Miami. And I think Sevy's got a big hole there at QB, which is going to set him back just enough to take a loss here against MB.
Look, MB has Justin Jefferson, but guess what? Sevy has Stephon Diggs playing KC, Mike Williams against Denver, CeeDee Lamb against Philly. I'm actually going to go with Sevy to knot it up with MB in the South. From a good matchup to a horrible one, the Toilet Bowl, Kyle versus Quinn. I'm going to go with Kyle in this matchup.
Yeah, I think it's I want to say it's pretty easy, but with these two teams, I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen week in, week out. I know we all think they're going to be pretty bad. So I think Quinn having no doubt his best player on his roster on a bye week. It's just I think it's curtains for Quinn this week and for the season. He's going to take the loss, and I think it's over for you, Quinn. Sorry, buddy.
Sorry, buddy, indeed. This is a race to 70 at this stage, Rogo, in terms of first team to 70 wins. Team Tico, Tony facing Raymond. Tony has had a rough go at it this season. Raymond has Lamar Jackson, who's been tremendous. Tony said in the group chat he's wholesaling his team. Who knows, Rogo? He could have Patty Mahomes and Travis Kelce this time tomorrow if he's able to make a nice trade here. Who do you have in this matchup? Tony versus Raymond.
I'm going Ramon. I think if he can get, he obviously has Tyler Higbee in his back pocket there to put it at tight end, so that bye is really not going to hurt him. Lamar Jackson's going to be in a big game against the surprising Giants. I think he's going to put up big numbers like he's continued to do. Dalvin Cook, that matchup favors him at Miami, so I think he's going to put up big numbers as well. And I think Garrett Wilson's going to get it going again. He's been quiet here the past couple of weeks since he had that big game in week 2, I believe. And now that Zach Wilson's back, he can actually throw the football a little bit. I think Garrett Wilson's going to have a big game. So, I'm going Ramon here.
Tony's going to be aggressive on the trade market. I think that he's going to make a big move this week. I think that the guys that we're looking at, not a lot to look at here, but the guys that we're looking at, this roster could look entirely different by the time this show is released. I think that Tony's going to make a move for Patty Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and I think that's going to be enough to get the job done. I'm going with Tony here in this one.
Is he saying something about getting Patty Mahomes?
Final matchup to get to, Blocker 5-0, the only 5-0 team in the league against a team that's been struggling. 1-4 Driscoll. Blocker has a few buys this week. Devontae Adams out, Dameon Pierce out. Is that enough for Driscoll to pick up a big win on the road?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Driscoll here. I think if Cooper Kupp can obviously keep things going the way he's been going this year, I think he's going to obviously propel that team into a victory, and DK Metcalf is going to kind of take points away from Geno Smith, I believe. So as long as Joe Burrow can have a decent game against New Orleans, I think that Driscoll might be able to pull this one out with the buys that Big Blocks has.
Blocker's been a great story this year, but shorthanded on a bye. I think that Driscoll is the right call. Cooper Kupp is going to keep him in this game, and DK Metcalf, David Montgomery, Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think that those guys are going to have good supporting games to help Driscoll get his second win of the year. Well, that's all the time we have for the Hammer and the Nail. I'd like to thank my co-host, Nick Rogowski. Roger, you're going to get the win this week. I know it, buddy. Keep the faith. Hopefully, this time next week, we'll be celebrating win number 2 for the great Rogostadl.
Hopefully, maybe I can squeak out a dub, but I'm not counting on it. So